Genesis chapter 28. Genesis 28. Genesis 28, and our text is verse 10 through verse 22, but I'm not going to be there just yet. The title of the message is Maturity. Now, just simply, the word maturity can refer to physical aspects. A baby is not mature. An adult is physically mature. But usually when that word is used, it's not in reference to physical attributes. It's in reference to mental. Because an adult can still act either mature or immature. So usually the word maturity has to do with something beyond the physical. The internal is what it has to do with. What do you call a cheesy dad joke that's finally reached maturity? Fully grown. You'll get it. Here's some signs of maturity. Your house plants are alive and you can't smoke any of them. Now, you shouldn't have done that when you were immature either. However, one sign of maturity is you forsake the sins of your youth. Now, if you're still enjoying the sins of your youth, you haven't matured physically or spiritually. Here's another one. It says, 6 a.m. is when you get up, not when you go to bed. That's what kids do. They want to stay up all night. They don't need much sleep, whatever. Well, as you mature physically, you start realizing, hey, it'd do me some good to get some rest. And you actually enjoy it. A nap sounds like a fun thing. That's a sign of maturity. Sleeping on the couch makes your back hurt. When you're young, you could care less. You can sleep anywhere. The older you get, the more picky you get about where you sleep. There's some things that give evidence that you've begun to mature. Now, Jacob in our story, this is who this is about in Genesis 28. He's on a fast track to maturity, whether he wants to or not. Now, we'll let Alexander Scorby read this to us. It's Genesis 28. It'll be verse 10 to 22.
And Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he lighted upon a certain place, and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place, and put them for his pillows, and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land. For I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. And Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid, and said, How dreadful is this place! This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And Jacob rose up early in the morning, and took the stone that he had put for his pillows, and set it up for a pillar, and poured oil upon the top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of that city was called Luz at the first. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. And this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the 10th unto thee.
In the life of Jacob, we've seen him through trickery gain the upper hand. He has the birthright, and he got the blessing. Now, he worked hard to get them through his own means. And now, things are going to change. This is what always happens. If you get something through the shortcut, you end up paying on the backside. Okay? Now, Jacob is going to pay the price. The path to exaltation begins with humiliation. Always does, always has, always will. Jacob himself, unwittingly, has already demonstrated this principle. Remember when, in order to get the blessing, he faked as though he was somebody else? Well, he had to go into his father in the name and proclaiming himself as his brother Esau. And he had to be clothed with the apparel of the beloved son's wardrobe in order to get the blessing from the father. For him, that had to be humiliating. For you, you didn't get approval with God until you went in Jesus Christ's name, until you put on the robes of righteousness, of his robes, not your own. So humility comes first. He's demonstrated it, but it hadn't clicked in his mind yet. It's about to. Let's notice the crisis. Genesis 28, look at verse 10. And Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. It's travel time. Now that's not normal for Jacob. He's a homeboy. He's not a traveler. Let's find out who he is. Back up to Genesis 25, verse 27. Genesis 25, 27. We're going to get the personality of Jacob here. Genesis 25, verse 27. And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man, dwelling in tents. He didn't want to get his hands dirty. There's too many bugs out there. He liked to stay in the tent. He liked to he probably had his own YouTube cooking show. I would call him a sissy. Okay, well now he's not a sissy, but he liked to be inside. He liked the indoors. His brother's just the opposite. Well, he's not going to, on his own, decide he's just going to up and travel 450 miles. He's being told he must go. And so he goes. This is a long journey for Jacob. And one of the natural stopping places along the road, or along the trip, is going to be this city called Luz. And I'm sure he couldn't wait to get there. He's been traveling, and this is a long journey just to get to Luz. It's at least 3 days from Beersheba. We've seen Abraham make the same journey, or almost the same journey. Abraham went from Beersheba to Mount Moriah. You remember that? That's Jerusalem. In Genesis 22:4, it says it was a 3-day journey. So Jacob's been out there a while, and it ain't his favorite cup of tea, traveling in the wilderness in the hot sun and sleeping outdoors. Well, there's a city, a famous city, Luz, and he can't wait to get there. But when he gets there, it's shut because it's dark. They lock the city up at dark. Well, things are not doing well for him. He's in crisis mode. Now I'm going to tell you where all this stuff is. Luz, or Bethel, is 12 miles north of Jerusalem. So you know where Jerusalem is? Luz is north of there. It's in the Mount Ephraim's. Okay? In order to get from Beersheba to Luz is 20 miles. So that's a long journey by foot. He's wore out when he gets there, and he finds he can't go in and get him a nice bath and a cup of tea and a nice bed to sleep in. He's going to make do in the field. He's going to produce his own bed with some rocks. Sounds comfortable. Genesis 28, look at verse 11. And he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of the place and put them for his pillows, and lay down in that place to sleep. Not good news. Probably not planning on getting a very good night's rest when you think a stone would be a good option for a pillow. You've suddenly changed your priorities in life. From the tent dweller to now he's picking out stones to be pillows. He's come a long way. He didn't choose that. When he set out to get the birthright and to get the blessing, In his mind, he never thought, this means I'll get to go sleep out in the field with stones from a pillow. But it was all part of the package. He just didn't read the fine print. Okay, that's been his crisis. Let's see his comprehension. This is the real awakening to maturity. Genesis 28, look at verse 16. And Jacob awaked out of sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. Now, there's the first step, is to admit you didn't know something, and now you know it. You can really tell who's immature by the people who think they know it all. The people who think they know it all don't even know all the questions. Here he says, I now realize God's right here. And he's been here, and I didn't even realize it. Now here's a normal response. If any Christian or unsaved person realizes that, here's the normal response, verse 17. And he was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Forget the gate that was locked to the city Luz. Right outside of Luz is actually the gate of heaven. Good thing he was blocked from getting into Luz. It's a dreadful thing. It's scary. The Lord is called the Lord of hosts. That means an army. He is full of power. He destroys at will. If you're not afraid of God, you've not seen him. Because everybody in the Bible, whoever does, that's their first response, is they're scared. They fall on their face and say, woe is me. Matter of fact, Daniel says there was no comeliness. That means I couldn't even control my bowels. He was that scared. Okay, that's the real God. If you've got a God that you can command and demand, you don't have the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible is scary. Jacob, can't remember who we're talking about. Jacob saw the real one. Now, that's going to mature him real quick. I recall I was at FedEx, and there was a guy there who had just retired. He was older, but he had dark hair, nice, still looked young. He liked to drive motorcycles. Well, he got in a motorcycle accident that messed him all up, and he ended up dying from it. But I went to visit him in the hospital, and I did not recognize him. In one accident, he had aged probably 30 years. His hair was jet white. Jet white. You didn't know there was white jets, but there are. It was stark white. That's a better phrase. Stark white. And he looked gaunt and frail. It was not like him at all. I wouldn't have known it was him if the note on the door didn't say it was. Well, this is Jacob right here. He's seen something, as he said in our passage, dreadful. God is scary. It aged him. It matured him in a quick hurry. Look at Exodus chapter 3. Exodus 3, verse 5. Exodus 3, verse 5. And he said, this is God talking to Moses at the burning bush. And he said, draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. When God shows up, he touches everything, and everything bows to him. Holy, 100% complete in submission to him. You had better too. And if you really saw him, you would. That would not be a thought, I'm going to rebel against him. In Joshua 5:15, we see Joshua meets an angel of the Lord. Joshua 5:15. Joshua 5, verse 15. And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. And Joshua did so. Yes, sir. Now, there's something interesting here. He says, all the time they're saying, take your shoes off, take your shoes off. Well, the Orientals still do that. You can't go in their house with your shoes on. In fact, we had a delivery we made. They made us take our shoes off. Or they didn't. They put a thing on our shoes. But that's normal. They want those shoes off. Okay? Why? Because your shoes, if you look at the bottom of your shoes, they're filthy. Don't bring that filth in here. That's what they're saying. That's what God's saying. I don't want to see any filth. The shoes have been protecting your feet. That's good. But keep the filth over there. Right here's holy. It's not filthy. You can walk on this. And that's the system that's all the way through the Bible. In Job chapter 9, verse 11. Job 9, verse 11. There's a lot of things we're not aware of. Jacob said, I wasn't aware that this was right here is where God is. And now I know it. He'd been there the whole time. Job 9, verse 11. It says, Lo, he goeth by me, and I see him not. He passeth on also, but I perceive him not. You know what? If your eyes could be open to the spiritual realm, you would see God is here, as well as the devil. There's a spiritual warfare that's centered on this playing field right here. They're not as interested in the heavenlies. They're interested in their prey, which is you and I. If you could see what's around us, it's spiritual warfare. In Job 33, verse 14. Job 33, verse 14. Could you imagine God's point of view on this? God's sitting up in heaven, and he's trying to get our attention and direct us and keep us out of harm's way. And so he gives us not only the billboard of creation and circumstances, but his word. And man ignores it. Here's why. Job 33:14. For God speaketh once, yea, twice, yet man perceiveth it not. Because we ain't listening. That was Jacob. He was out there fleeing. God finally got a hold of him, gave him this dream, this wild stuff, and showed himself to him. And then all of a sudden, he said, look, the thing that's been here, I finally understand. That's maturity. That's growing up. Look at Isaiah chapter 8. Isaiah 8, verse 13. Here's a sign of maturity Christians know nothing about nowadays. If you don't fear God, you don't know him. I could give you, I've done it before. At Marcus, when we were at Marcus Point, I filled up a whole whiteboard with references on the fear of God. Go through that. Go through your Bible sometime. I've got it in one of my other Bibles where I've marked it. Look at the word, the fear of God and the fear of the Lord. It's on just about every page in the Old Testament, and it appears quite often in the New as well. Isaiah chapter 8, verse 13. Sanctify the Lord of hosts himself, and let him be your fear, and let him be your dread. That's good. If you're scared of God, you'll be scared of doing what he says stay away from. Amen. That'll grow you up in a hurry. You know, part of being a kid is being stupid. I mean, really. You just don't know. You're ignorant. And it becomes your parents' responsibility to head you in. Hey, you don't understand, that stove is hot. I just got done cooking on it. It might not be red, but I just finished cooking on it 30 minutes ago. It's still warm. Don't touch it. Okay, go ahead. You'll learn something. That's what God does with us. He's trying to teach us because we're stupid. Now, after we've been through some experiences, we should begin to mature. And that's where Jacob is in his life. Notice, after this amazing dream and God appearing to him, He has a great idea. First response to maturity is making a right step, being wise. Doing something based on knowledge. Genesis 28, verse 18. I call this consecration. Not concentration. Consecration. That is dedicating something to God. Genesis 28, verse 18. And Jacob rose up early in the morning and took of the stone that had been for his pillows and set it up for a pillar and poured oil upon the top of it. And he called the name of the place Bethel, but the name of the city was called Luz at the first. People have some kind of a crazy hang-up about, is it Bethel or is it Luz, and how can it be both? Well, Bethel just means the house of God. You'll find the house of God is anywhere God shows up. It's all his. He owns every square millimeter of it. He says, I fill heaven and earth. It's all mine. Not any such thing as make yourself at home. It is his home. When your eyes are opened and you see him, you suddenly see what Jacob saw. I'm sitting in his living room. That's right. So it's his. That's Bethel. Now the city was the heathen city, and it was called Luz. And you'll see the names go back and forth all the time through the Bible. God will give you some names that matter. Who cares about Luz? That's the heathen's name. The house of God, that means something. I'd rather live there any day. Amen. Exodus chapter 12. Exodus chapter 12, we're going to be in verse 14. Jacob has done something strange here. He set up a pillar. And on this pillar he poured some oil. He didn't have any bread, so he's going to eat the rock. No. He pours this oil to anoint it. To say this is a special spot. He's building a monument. And that's for a reason. He wants to memorialize, to remember something. All the way through the Bible, we're supposed to do this. You're supposed to have a monument, a memorial of your own. Anytime you see God do something in your life, you should write it down. You should build something, do something so it can be remembered and it can be preached to other people. So they'll ask you, what in the world is that for? That's so ugly. What does that mean? Well, let me tell you. Exodus 12, verse 14. He's talking here about the Passover. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial. And ye shall keep it a feast unto the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. Okay, so they did that. Every year they put on a big feast. They had real strict guidelines on what they could and could not do. It was a big ordeal. Why? He says there's one reason right here. It's a memorial. People are going to be asking you about it. They're going to say, why are y'all putting on such a big spread all of a sudden? How come we can't have any leavened bread? You know, how come we're killing all the lambs around here? Okay, there's a reason for it. It's a memorial. You're supposed to remember something by it. What was it about? The Passover. God saved a special people and he killed a whole bunch of them that weren't so special. Very important. Exodus chapter 17. Exodus 17, verse 14. Here's a way that every single person can have a memorial to God. This is the most simple way to do it. Some of us are not sculptors. Some of us couldn't, build a wall. Here's something you can do. Exodus 17:14. And the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua. Okay, so you could do that. Instead of building a device or, a statue for a memorial, you can write a book. I don't mean that you publish. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It doesn't matter. But write a book when you see God do something in your life. That means something. It should. So write it down. Now it'll be good for you to go back and read it. When you start feeling down sometime, open that book up and start remembering who God is. How you've personally seen him. That'll be a good memorial for you. But it's also good for other people. Leave it laying around so other people pick it up. What's this? Ooh, that's weird. That's a good response. Let me tell you about it. That's a good thing. Look at Joshua chapter 7. Joshua 4, verse 7. Joshua 4, verse 7. Here's Joshua. He's bringing the children of Israel in through the Jordan River, and they're coming into the land. And they're supposed to do something special. They're supposed to take some stones out of the riverbank, or the river, and set them up on the bank and build a memorial, a statue. And the people are going to scratch their heads, and he said people from, years and years down the line are going to see this, and they're going to think we're stupid. Joshua says, shut up and do what I said. Joshua 4, verse 7. Then ye shall answer them, that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, when it passed over Jordan. The waters of Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be for a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. They're still there somewhere. I don't know where they are, but they're there. Because he said forever. They're going to hang around even after heaven and earth pass away. And when he creates a new heaven and a new earth, they'll still be in that spot. Because he said forever. He didn't say a long time. He said forever. Okay, that's a good memorial. Now, we should do the same thing in our life. When God brings you across a troublesome circumstance, build you a memorial. Maybe you don't build it, write it. Do something so you know that it made a difference. And so the world can see it. We've got a whole bunch of people running around right now tearing down statues and memorials for a reason. They say that means something. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that. You already know where I stand on it. However, the fact of the matter is this. A memorial means something. And people know it. Therefore, if we're Christians, we ought to have some too. Because if God means something to us, we would do what people do that say something means something. A memorial. Look at Nehemiah chapter 2. Nehemiah 2, verse 20. This is the children of Israel are coming back into the land. They've been coming back from captivity. And it never ceases. The same systems repeat over and over. Wicked people want to infiltrate. They want to jump in there so that they can take advantage. And here they are. Here's the proper response to it. Nehemiah 2, verse 20. Then answered I them, and said unto them, the God of heaven, he will prosper us. So if you got any other ideas, just forget it. You ain't as big as God. Therefore, we his servants will arise and build. But ye have no portion, nor right, nor memorial in Jerusalem. He said, we can prove you don't belong. There's nothing here in Jerusalem that you built. There's no proof that you've had any relationship with God. I wonder if that was said today. Prove to me you have a relationship with God. You got anything to prove it that we can take to court? I don't mean in your psychic abilities. I don't mean something that's just known between you and God in the spirit realm. I mean physically. Is there something to tell the world, this is my God? Should be. Psalm chapter 56. Psalm 56, verse 8. Psalm 56, verse 8. David here. He says, thou tellest my wanderings. Jacob's got it. He's out there wandering. Now, he's not wandering aimless. He's got a trip he's on. He's on a one-way trip 450 miles away. He says, thou tellest my wanderings. Put thou my tears into thy bottle. Are they not in thy book? We should be writing a memorial, a book. But guess what? God's already doing the same thing with us. He's writing a memorial of you, every individual. There's coming a day in Revelation chapter 21 or 22 there, he says the books are open. Says it again in Daniel. The books were opened. Plural, not singular. That is, every person's got a book written in heaven. God writes down, they were thinking on me today. Or God writes down, they rejected what I had revealed to them. God writes it. He wants to remember you. He's got a memorial up there too. He says they're in your books. Look at Malachi 3 verse 16. Here's a good one. Malachi 3:16. Want to know what God's doing in heaven right now? This is what he's doing. Malachi 3 verse 16. Then they that feared the Lord spake often one to another. Okay, we've got all the elements we should have. Fear God and speak to somebody else about it. And the Lord hearkened and heard it. And a book of remembrance was written before him for them that feared the Lord and that thought upon his name. God's writing down the actions you take right now. It's a good thing that book's not in print for other humans to read. But one day it will be. Be careful what's in it. Now, Jacob has come a long way. And he's beginning to mature. The natural thing that happens when you begin to mature is you think, I've got it all now. You know that thing where you take one step forward and 25 steps back? And that's where he is. He's had an amazing experience. God's come down there and talked to him, gave him some promises, revealed some things to him he didn't even know. And here's what he does. In our passage, he's going to be an idiot. He's come so far so fast, and now all of a sudden he turns around and goes the other direction. Maturity doesn't mean you no longer make mistakes. It means you're willing to learn from them and not repeat them. If you're not mature enough to say, hey, that was dumb, I don't want to do that again, then you got a long ways to go. Jacob still has a lot to learn. He's heard God give him a promise, but now he wants to make a contract with God. God just gave him a grant. Why would you take a grant and say, no, let's make it a loan? That'd be a stupid thing to do. But that's what he's doing here. Because then he gets to become the judge of God's performance. Because he can decide whether or not God fulfilled his end of the bargain. When it's a one-way deal and God's just giving you a grant, you accept it or reject it. When you fill out a contract, you say, you do this and then we'll do this. Well, that means Jacob gets to line up at the end of it and say, I don't feel like you finished this part right here. Go back, and I don't like the color of that one. You know, that's what people do nowadays. Look at it in Genesis 28:20. Genesis 28:20. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God. That's never good to put those two words together. If, doubt, and God. If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on. Now, I'm going to tell you, I don't believe the same thing that your intellectual theologians will tell you. They'll tell you the phrase here, if, does not mean doubt. It means because. But I think that the word if is pretty easy to understand. It's two letters. The word because is a long, big term. If simply means if. Now, the reason they give behind that is sometimes it is used that way. Jesus says, and I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men to me. Okay. Well, there's no than statement. When there's an if and then followed by a than, you have a contract. If there's an if without a confirming statement at the end of it, then it stands as is. So here, verse 21, so that I come again to my Father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. So this is an if-then statement that he's going to judge. Verse 22, and this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the 10th unto thee. Don't let anybody tell you that's tithe. The word 10th means 10th. No preacher wants this tithe. You know what Jacob's doing? He's saying, there's one period of time I'm going to tithe on. According to our passage here, he says, I'm going to tithe from the time I leave until the time I return home safely. He's going to give it to the Lord. Now, was there any Levites he was giving it to? How's he giving it to the Lord? Probably a sacrifice. And back then, tithe rarely was ever monetary. It was actual product. It was animals, it was grain, and it was a sacrifice to the Lord, and the Lord came down and consumed it. And you knew that it was accepted or rejected. Genesis 28, verse 13. Genesis 28:13. Let's see what our deal had begun with. When God was speaking, and Jacob was no longer awake and couldn't speak for himself, here's what God had to say. Behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and of Isaac, the God of Isaac, and the land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. Period. No discussion allowed. I'm doing this. God didn't ask what his opinion of it was. He didn't even give him an opportunity to say, I don't even want it. Is that the best you can offer? Look at verse 15. And behold, I am with thee. Not will be. Not conditional, if you'll act like I like you to, then I'll stay around. No. I am with you. Period. You didn't know this before, that's why I'm telling you. And will keep thee in what? All places whither thou goest. That is, you can be stupid if you want to, but I'm going to be right there. Anywhere you go, I'm going to be there. That's a promise. And will bring thee again into this land. I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. Now, we've got a promise just like that. When you get saved, you've been given the same promise. God can't leave you. If his Holy Spirit's in you, it ain't going nowhere. Find it in John chapter 6. John 6, verse 37. Nope. That was
Where are we going at?
John chapter 6, verse 37.
37?
Mm-hmm. It almost reminds you of Peter when he was up on the Mount of Transfiguration. It says, I don't know what to say, but let me say something. Let's build 3 tabernacles here. John 6, verse 37. For all that the Father giveth me shall come unto me, and him that cometh to me I will in no wise cast out. You can't get rid of him. Sorry, once you get saved, you're saved whether you want to be or not. You don't get to change your mind about it. God's with you in all places you go. You can be wise or you can be stupid. It doesn't matter. He's going to be there. John chapter 10. John 10, verse 28. John 10, verse 28. And I give unto them temporary life. No. Conditional. No. I give unto them eternal. That means forever. Life. If he didn't give it to you, then the verse is wrong. If you're saved, he gave it to you. And they shall never perish. 100% impossible. If you're saved, you cannot be lost. Once saved, always. Neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. Well, one person will come along and say, well, nobody can take me out of God's hand, but I can take myself out. Well, are you a man? Well, then you ain't big enough. Look at it, verse 29. My Father which gave them me is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. Let's say you got some really big boy britches on and you could pull yourself out of Jesus' hand. He said that ain't enough. You got to get out of the Father's hand. And that one nobody is able to do. Look at 1 Corinthians 3. It doesn't seem fair, does it? You can get saved, you can't lose it, and you can live like a heathen, yet I'm just beating my head against the bricks trying to do everything the right way, and it just doesn't seem fair. They're having all the fun and I'm not. How can they go to heaven and both of us get to heaven and I'm doing everything right and struggling and they're just living like it, everything they want? Let's see it in our verse, 1 Corinthians 3, verse 15. One day there's going to be a judgment. He says, if any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss. That is, God's going to weigh the works when we get to heaven. Some people have, by their life, lived nothing but wood, hay, and stubble, as it's referred to in our passage. Something that'll just burn up. Some people who have struggled and done exactly what God said and lived the right way and followed His commandments, they have produced gold, silver, precious stones. Those don't burn up. Here's what happens with the carnal man who's saved but yet never lived like it. Here's what it says right after the colon. But he himself shall be saved. Even though everything just burned up, he'll still be saved, yet so as by fire. That is, the only thing remaining after the fire is salvation. He's in heaven, but he does not have any works he can show. There's no gold, there's no silver, there's no precious stones. But he's still there, he's saved. He didn't lose it. Look at one other place, Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4, verse 30. He says, and grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, whereby ye are sealed. If you seal something, can it fall out? Nope. If something is sealed, how do you get it out? You have to break the seal. So how does our seal get broken? Let's read our verse. Whereby ye are sealed unto the day of redemption. You know what redemption is? Heaven. Millennium. Everything is returned, redeemed. He says, you're sealed. Nobody can break that seal. The only time it's going to be broken is on the day of redemption. Not the day of condemnation. The day of redemption. And you know why it's broken then? Because you're made a new creature. When we see him, we'll just be like he is. So we're going to take that seal and break it and give you something even better.
Hallelujah.
A new body. Romans chapter 3. Romans chapter 3, verse 4. Here's what Jacob has done. He said, okay, I hear you. I hear your contract you just gave me. It wasn't a contract, a grant that you gave me, and I'm going to raise you a contract. Like he's playing cards or something. Well, you know, man does that. Because then they think they have the right to determine whether or not God has done what God ought to do. You can't judge God, but most people do. Romans 3, verse 4. But God forbid. Yea, let God be true, but every man a liar. As it is written, that thou mightest be justified in thy sayings. That's God be justified. And thou mightest overcome, God might overcome, when thou, God, art judged. Man tries to judge God. And you know what? He can't judge God because God's holy and righteous. God says, I know there's coming a day when man's going to judge my actions. And I will prove that my actions were holy and righteous. In the judgment day, I believe that there's going to come a time where God's going to allow men to question him. Why did you do this? And why did you allow that? Well, they did it on purpose. He did that on purpose. And at that point, he'll reveal to us all of the circumstances and all of the things that were sin, the things that were righteousness, and we'll realize he made the right move, regardless of how it looked on earth's point of view. At that point, you won't be able to point your finger and say that was a bad move for you to make. You'll say that was the best move. Because man won't be able to judge him. He's righteous. Look at Romans 3 verse 19. He says, now we know that what things soever the law saith, it saith to them that are under the law. That's you and me. Everybody's under the law. Now, we've got a nation right now who's trying to live outside of the law. There's no such thing as living outside of the law. God's written a law on every man's heart. We call it a conscience. And you know when you've broke the law, whether there was a state ordinance for it or not. God's got a law. So everybody's under law. That every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before God. He says one day we're going to stand before judgment. One man's going to say, well, in my country they had no rule about murder. And I didn't like that guy over there, so I killed him. God's going to say, you knew that was wrong because I wrote that law on your heart. Therefore, you're guilty, and you know it, and I know it. Look at verse 26. Romans 3:26. To declare, I say at this time, God's righteousness, that he, God, might be just, and the justifier of him which believeth in Jesus. Now, isn't that great? There's no justification when we look at it according to man's logic that we should be saved. Zero. We don't deserve it. Even after being saved, we've not lived according to what we've been given. Therefore, we don't deserve it. But you know what? It's not up to you and it's not up to me. He is the judge. Whatever he says is right. He says he's just and the justifier. He makes us just of them that come to him. Now, in conclusion, I say a phrase that I love to use. But here's the conclusion to the matter. Grow up. That's maturity. Grow up. Look at it in Malachi 4. Malachi 4 verse 2. Jacob's still got a lot of growing up to do, and he will in the next few chapters. But so do a lot of Christians. Malachi 4 verse 2. He says, but unto you that fear my name, there's our formula, fear God, shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings. And ye shall go forth and grow up, about time, as calves of the stall. God's saying, you know, it's a good thing from my point of view if a man will grow up. We should grow up. When the Son of Righteousness shows up, the millennium begins, men will suddenly grow up that never would have before. You know, we got a bunch of mega churches right now who the children in it never grow up. That's why they've got the strobe light and the fog machine on the stage. Because the youth group, in order to get them out of the youth group, you had to bring the youth group to the congregation. Because they would never grow up. God says you should grow up. Mark chapter 4. Mark 4 verse 27. Mark 4:27. Now here he's talking about seed. We know that in our life, the seed is the Word of God. That's what gave us new life. He's going to talk about something here. Mark 4 verse 27. And should sleep and rise night and day, and the seed should spring and grow up. He knoweth not how. You know what? You pour enough of that Bible in you and you start obeying it. You water it and you fertilize it. You know what? It'll grow. And you can't tell how it grew. You know, we can determine that we want to have a garden. And you know, a garden is a whole lot of work. A whole lot of work. You can do all the fertilizing, you can do all the watering, you can do, you can put shade on it, you can put sun on it, whatever it's called for. Do all the things the book says to do, and it not produce. Because it ain't up to the ground or science. A seed grows because of one reason. God says grow. That's it. The best things you can do may or may never work, based on whether or not God lets it grow. He says he knows not how. Nobody actually knows how a seed grows. They know things that help it, but they don't know how it grows. They know it does spring forth. They know it dies, and they know this happens and that happens, but they don't know how. I'll tell you how. God. It's only of God that can take something dead and give it life. Except a seed fall into the ground and die, it remaineth alone. You know what? When you and I were born into this world, we were born in dead in trespasses and sin. And we got life, didn't we? If you got the seed, you did. And that seed's supposed to grow your entire life. Should be maturing. In Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians 4, verse 15. Here's another way to mature. Ephesians 4, verse 14. But speaking the truth in love. Okay, sometimes those things seem to be opposites. I mean, really, they do. Sometimes truth doesn't seem very lovely. And sometimes just a whole heaping of love ain't very true. Okay, you got to get the right balance on that thing. Get the truth of the Word of God. And then put as much sugar as God will let you put on it. Ask Him. Let Him be in charge. But don't become... There's a time that God's going to rule with a rod of iron, but it ain't right now. So right now, sprinkle as much sugar as God lets you put on it. But don't compromise the truth by adding too much sugar. Speak the truth in love. Okay, but speaking the truth in love this is what it'll do for you, grow up unto Him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. All right, that's maturity according to Jacob, and we'll cover more of his life later on.